This video is sponsored by the Excelsior Sporting Club, Lion Paw Security Services, and Sigma Sports Management.
I'm going to stick to my guns on this. Boxing is about timing, not just in the ring, but outside of it. And occasionally, because of how terrific Beterbiev is as a finisher, he's arguably the best finisher in world boxing, probably him or Hanoi, right? But because how good he is as a finisher, we sometimes ignore the fact that there's holes in his game and that he's been shaken up, and he has his moments in fights, had his moments against Anthony Yarde where Yarde had him in a bit of difficulty. Callum Smith is another fighter who's taken his punch from super middle up to light heavy. He's cleaning out light heavyweights. He's also got brilliant technique, Callum, very, very experienced, had all that experience at super middleweight, the World Boxing Super Series. He was experienced as an amateur. I know that Canelo was dominant against him, but he's not in with Canelo. I think, Beterbiev is getting on. I think he's 37, 38 years old. I think timing could be decisive here, and I think Callum's going to get him. It might be wishful thinking. I'm trying to be as analytical on it as I can possibly be. But I honestly think if Callum lands the kind of punches he can land, left hook or right hand, I think Beterbiev will be in trouble. And I think there'll be a new light heavyweight champion.
I'm a bit torn on this this fight between Beterbiev and Smith, if I'm honest. I think we know Beterbiev now is well into his late 30s, approaching 40. He's never looked troubled, really. We've seen Callum Johnson put him down. Seemed like a kind of flash, knocked down a good shot, but, he bounced straight back up and obliterated Callum Johnson, if we're being honest, shortly after. I think Anthony Yarde gave him problems, but ultimately, he managed to retain his composure and he managed to finish Anthony Yarde as well. Callum Smith is a bit of a strange one for me now. He's moved up to light heavy. People were kind of clamouring for Smith to be light heavy for years. You've seen the pictures of him standing alongside Johnson when they were in camp together, and you thought, how is that guy the light heavy and that guy the super middle? He's massive. But it'll be interesting to see how he steps up to the plate here. I think there'll be a lot of question marks after his performance against Canelo Alvarez. They are still lingering. I don't think he's done anything since that makes you confidently able to pick him as a favourite or a cert here. I think Beterbiev, if he fights the way he's always fought, there's a danger that the fight could slip away from him, and Callum Smith could be younger, fresher, could keep him moving and could stay out of harm's way. I just don't think Smith is ready to beat Beterbiev. It's probably more a case that I don't think Beterbiev is ready to be beaten quite yet. If they have a close fight and they have a rematch, I could maybe see Smith winning the rematch. I think this time, though, Beterbiev will win, but I'll call it on points. I think that Callum Smith will take him the full 12-round distance.
Really good fight. I think kind of as Brits, we're all hoping that maybe Callum's the one to catch him on the slide. I do really like Beterbiev, but I look at him when he fights and I think he kind of seems to fight the same fight quite a lot. I don't know if that's making sense, but I feel like he fights the same fight quite a lot. It's hard with Callum to look too far back, because I just think at 168, if you look at the John Ryder fight and the Canelo fight, at the weight done, it's going to sound probably really obvious, but I just think the game plan's the most important thing for Callum Smith. If you can find a way to navigate what Beterbiev brings, because I can imagine if you're watching the tapes, like I said, if he fights that same fight, so if you can kind of put the game plan in and find a way to navigate it, I guess there is a way for Callum to win the fight. He got dropped with a left hook against Callum Johnson, and Callum Smith has got a mean left hook, I've got to say. But obviously Beterbiev don't mind taking one to give one. And Smith can be seriously easy to hit at times. I'd like to go with Callum Smith for my heart, but my head I still have to edge Beterbiev. I think it either goes in the way that when he feels the power of Beterbiev, and I know I said I don't want to reference the 168 days, but kind of in the Canelo mold, when he feels the power of Beterbiev, he might shell up a little bit, or he does the Anthony Yarde fights, fire with fire, and kind of goes down in the blaze of glory sort of thing. Rooting for Callum, but I think most 99% sensible boxing people will stick with Beterbiev for now, I think.
Right, so I'm going to favour Beterbiev quite heavily on this one, actually. For me, he's 19 knockouts, 19 stoppages. I mean, the only time he's actually hit the canvas was against Callum Johnson. And it's funny because I remember interviewing Beterbiev, probably one of my last interviews I ever did for Boxing Monthly, that didn't actually get printed. There we go. It was literally on the cusp of COVID kicking in. And at the time, I was reading off all the English fighters. I said Callum Smith. I was like Anthony Yard, and he was pretty much sort of, respectfully sort of saying who. The only one he remembered was Callum Johnson. He said, I've heard a little bit about this Buatsi guy. He said, but Callum Johnson, he says, I'd have a rematch with him. He said he's pushed me harder than anybody, and he says, and he hits hard. So I would say that Callum Smith can probably hit as hard as Callum Johnson, but Callum Johnson was a little bit more sort of vivacious. He certainly had a little bit more sort of energy to him. My fear with Callum Smith is that he's just not a natural. He hasn't grown into the light heavyweight just yet. He may have been walking around at 14, 15 stone for a long time. But if you look, he had his loss against Saul Alvarez, which was a one-sided beating. To be honest, there really wasn't any competition there whatsoever. And he's had 2 fights so far at 175 against a guy called Castillo Rivera and a guy called Mateo Bodelic. Both of them are pretty much like, who? And then all of a sudden he's in with Artur Beterbiev. I mean, the fight everyone wants to see of Beterbiev against Bivol, which doesn't seem to be happening. So in the meantime, Beterbiev goes in against Callum Smith. So I'm going to go Beterbiev late round stoppage, somewhere between 8 to 11.